Getting up in the dark at 3 a.m. on a cold English morning was agony. I hated it. Never could seem to eat that early with a nervous stomach, so the fighter pilot's breakfast of coffee and a cigarette was standard. Then we'd head on over to the mission briefing to find out exactly where we were going and how many German fighters we could expect. After picking up helmet, chute, Mae West, and other equipment, we'd head out to the line. All of this would have been a horrible experience if it weren't for that wonderful P-51. When you got in the Mustang, it felt like you just strapped the wings on. You didn't feel like you had a fuselage around your body. You were a part of the airplane. I loved it more than any other plane I ever flew. I'll never forget it.
The North American P-51 Mustang, everybody's idea of a fighter plane. When World War II ended, there probably wasn't an American who didn't know what a Mustang was. And since then, pilots have dreamed of flying it. The ultimate flying machine. Sleek, with a Rolls-Royce Packard-built Merlin 1,500 horsepower engine up front. A cockpit you pull on like a pair of pants instead of climbing into. When England was looking for fighters in 1940, it came with a shopping list to U.S. manufacturers. Happy with North American Aviation's Harvard trainers, the British ordered a new fighter from the company, which they named the Mustang, powered by an Allison engine. It was faster than anything else at low level. When the Rolls Merlin high-altitude engine was grafted onto the airframe, the finest all-around fighter of the war came into being, able to range deep into enemy territory and still handle enemy fighters. Without it, the 8th Air Force bomber campaign, which was almost stopped in 1943 by the Luftwaffe, would not have been able to carry on. Pilots knew they had a thoroughbred on their hands when they started flying this wild, spirited pony of the Old West. The last military Mustangs weren't retired until 1983, when the Dominican Republic sold theirs into the Civil Warbird market. Everything about this airplane says flying. What was it someone said? If it looks right, it flies right. Ever since I was 3 years old, when my dad commanded a squadron of Mustangs, this was my idea of what airplanes look like. I guess I thought everyone's dad had a bunch of them, and I wanted to fly one. That dream has come true in spades many times over, but the experience is a rare one among flyers, since so few Warbirds exist out of the 300,000 we made during World War II. That's why we're here today, to take you along, put you in the cockpit with me, and turn the horses loose. Thanks to Elmer Ward, owner of Man of War here, and his major Mustang parts company, Pioneer Aero at Chino, California. The first thing most pilots ask, other than what's it like to fly a 51, is how do you get the training? It really doesn't differ much from World War II. Get a good amount of time in tail-wheel type aircraft, such as the PT-17 Stearman, then as much as possible in the AT-6 Advanced Trainer, particularly a few hours from the back seat to get used to the lack of visibility forward on the ground. Once you can fly a T-6, you can fly any of the fighters, if you heed the second requirement. Memorize the pilot's operating handbook. Pilots who try to shortcut the handbook tell some sad tales. Whenever I'm away from the P-51 for a while, I get the handbook out the night before I'm supposed to fly, and I read it through. It's quite a surprise to find some things I'd forgotten. At 400 miles an hour, you can't afford to forget very much. There are also some fine dual-control Mustangs available for transition training, and these really help add safety to the process. The first thing we can do is jump up on the wing and check the cockpit to make sure battery, generator, and magneto switches are off and controls unlocked. Want to make sure that the battery and generator switches are off, the magneto switch off, and the controls unlocked. Then we'll come up here, check the hydraulic reservoir, make sure it basically has enough fluid in it, and we'll secure all that with a screwdriver. Then we're back up here to the oil level. Has a regular stick on it, except this one says gallons, and it goes up to 12. Generally around 9 or 10 is plenty. Then we're back up to the front for the coolant levels. And there are two coolant levels, basically. You're checking the intercooler level at this point, and then up at the front of the nose, we check the general coolant in gallons. We should be all set. Off the left wing of the trailing edge, we'll continue the pre-flight by checking the fuel gas cap to make sure it's secure, and also we check visually for the fuel level. Get the cap secured back on. Check the flaps for security and a little bit of freedom of movement. The flap actuating rod is at the base of the flap. We certainly want to check that. Walk over to the aileron, check for freedom of movement, and that the aileron gap seal is installed and fitting properly. This gives a great deal of effectiveness to the aileron. We don't want to fly without one. Onto the front of the airplane in the pre-flight, we want to check the gear strut here. Make sure we have 3.5 inches of inflation. Check the security of the landing gear fairing doors, the downlock pins, condition of the landing light, hydraulic actuators for leaks also from coolant pipes, general condition of the inside of the wheel well. These big fairing doors, which go up and down and streamline the airplane when the wheels go up. We want to check the inside of the intake scoop for the radiator and the oil radiators. And also, when we're here, we go ahead and drain a little bit of fuel out of the fuel tank sumps to make sure there's no water in there. Up to the front of the airplane now, we want to check on the exhaust stacks, and basically you tinkle them with a screwdriver. If one of them thunks, then it's cracked. And that tells you you're going to have to replace it. Up here to the front, we want to check the carburetor air scoop. Any creatures that might have crawled in during the night, you just want to make sure all this is clear for intake for the carburetor. General condition of the propeller, movement, security, and leading edge of the blades for nicks and things like that. Then down into the wheel well here on the right side, and the main thing here is the accumulator pressure on the hydraulic reservoir. It has to be at least 400 pounds of pressure. General condition of the well, back to strut inflation, security of the doors, on around to the tail. Back to the trailing edge of the right wing, we check the elevators here for the same condition we have on the other side. Security of the flap again, and the flap actuating rod here at the base of the flap. Back to the tail. We want to check the attachment on the elevators and freedom of movement, condition of the elevator trim tab, condition of the rudder and its trim tab as well, and the attach points. Back to the other elevator, its trim tab, attachment, and freedom of movement. Then over here to the tail wheel, we'll check tail wheel inflation and the strut inflation. And on up into the cockpit. I love the Mustang cockpit. Everything is easily within reach. It's organized for the pilot. Simple, really. And it's a lot like the T6. All the more reason to go master a T6 before you come out to fly a Mustang. Let's do the before start checklist. We'll go through that left to right. Flaps up. Carburetor ram air. Carburetor heat in normal. Coolant doors open and in manual. Rudder trim 6 degrees right. Aileron trim 0, elevator trim 0, throttle cracked 1 inch, mixture and idle cut off, propeller full forward, throttle friction set, magnetos off, supercharger in low, fuel set on the left tank because the carburetor return line puts about 10 gallons an hour back into the left tank when you fly, and the fairing door release in. Ready for start.
The only thing to watch for on startup is overpriming, which can cause a very exciting exhaust stack fire. In other words, too much fuel gets in the prime system and the exhaust fills up with raw gas, and all of a sudden the flames start coming out of there. The only thing you can do when that happens is keep it cranking, and it'll eventually start. It's just an fuel problem, or too much gas in the system, too rich is what you'd call it. And that way it'll draw the flames back in the engine, it'll start up eventually. If you don't, of course, then you just have fire all over the place. So you keep it cranking. Ready? My adrenaline's pumping. Every time I fiddle with the switches, I get my adrenaline up, so here we go. Battery and generator on. Fuel boost pump on. Check fuel pressure, right up to normal. And how a Mustang pilot is expected to start one of these things without four hands, I never know, but we're going to give her a good try. Engage the starter, and we'll go 6 blades. Here we go. Check the oil pressure right away. We're right up to the oil pressure to normal. Oh, that smell and sound, I tell you, that's half the excitement of flying one of these things. You smell the burn oil and hear that burlap popping. Now close the canopy and get some of this noise staying on the outside. See how much different that sounds once you do that? Of course, once you start to take off, it's a little bit different, but right now we're isolated. We've got everything running, everything's in the green. You've got to watch the oil temperature a bit, because on a cold day it can shoot way up and you have too much oil pressure, so you let it idle a bit to warm the oil up. You know, a funny thing about a liquid-cooled fighter out of World War II is that the oil temperature can often still be too low, while the coolant temperature, the radiator, the glycol, the press-tone, in your case in the car it'd be antifreeze, that heats up real quick. So you end up with this mismatch problem. If the oil's still too cold, the glycol's getting too hot. On a cool day like this, that will be the case. We'll have to watch that very carefully just to make sure that we don't end up getting a mismatch there.
I destroyed an aircraft on my first mission. Unfortunately, it was a P-51. I was taking off my leader's wing when I blew a tire and swerved toward him. Kicking the opposite rudder, I avoided the collision, but by the time I got straightened out, I didn't have enough speed or runway to get airborne. I cut the switches and held the stick in my gut and closed my eyes. The plane ran off the field, across a sunken road which sheared off the gear, dropped 2 full wing tanks and skidded across the field, tore off the left wing on a stump and wound up with its nose in a chicken coop. I was told later that I killed a crow in a hedge along the road and 2 chickens in the coop. That Mustang was rugged. I didn't even get a scratch.
We're clear of the earth. Let go of the brakes. She starts rolling. Tap the brake a little bit. The great thing about the Mustang is it was blessed with ingenious tail wheel steering. It is a system that was very much unlike most other World War II fighters. You pull the stick in your stomach and the tail wheel steering engages and the thing just steers beautifully. You push it forward, it unlocks the tail wheel, and you can go full swivel for tight maneuvering. So you don't need very much brake in this. You can just push the runway, outrun the runway a bit, get the steering engaged, and it is a wonderful thing.